afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing today? I hope your morning session was fun and exciting. Excellent, excellent. I want to thank you guys for your engagement and your enthusiasm so far. You guys have been a great first cohort and it gives us the boost we need, right, to keep going on this journey. I'll be honest, this afternoon is kind of one of the items that I circled on my calendar. I'm really looking forward to this event right here. As I already mentioned to you, young people and education are so important to His Excellency, right? And so I felt like it's so important, we felt it was important as a team to have him interact with a lot of the great young minds that are doing things in the intersection between education and technology, which is all you guys. So with that, I want to say it's my honor and privilege to introduce the immediate past Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
Thank you.
So, in my opinion, I feel like we've had a pretty good 2.5 days, right? But don't take my word for it. I'd like to have a couple of the teammates, the participants, come forward and give us their account on how the week has gone so far. So with that, I'd like to ask Elizabeth and Anthony to come up to the front and give us a little bit about the last few days.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. Your Excellency, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. It is a pleasure to have you with us today and an honor to have you here, sir. Good afternoon to my fellow participants, instructors and facilitators, and the entire team of Future Perspective for the amazing opportunity. I'm Elizabeth Adams Oyarese, the founder of Lincoln Circles Academy and an educator. I am so delighted to be here in Future Perspective and all what we've been doing for ITET training so far. So one of the most amazing things I realized when I joined on the first day of our session was the pluralism class, which we had after the welcome session. It was really beautiful because I could connect that. As a young child, 10-year-old, growing up in GSS2, I had a class teacher who would exclude me from participating in classroom activities. He would never call on me even when I know the answers to questions. And so one day, Mr. Solomon walked into the classroom. Playing with students, he would hold folded paper and act like he was going to throw it to them. And when they least expected it, he would throw and they would dodge. It was fun. I wanted to join. But Mr. Solomon did not call on me. A few minutes in, I heard him say, "Elizabeth, I was so delighted. It was like a breakthrough for me." So I walked out and Mr. Solomon had me to one end of the classroom, while I was at the other end of the classroom, and Mr. Solomon pretended to throw paper to me. I couldn't see because of my low vision, so I decided to just dodge and play along. I noticed he was laughing, and when I walked back to him, I realized he held no folded paper. Then he said to me, "Elizabeth, you are worse than a blind man." That day I came to the resolve to be an educator because I believed no child had to go through what I had gone through as a person. And I believe that in my educational journey I would be able to. But that 10-year-old Elizabeth forgot that only her could not be in every classroom at every time. Which is why I am so delighted for Future Perspective that has gathered educators across the world together and teaching us about pluralism. Pluralism is why we can have Mustafa from a different part of the world, we can have Chinedu, we can have Shem coming together to learn despite their ethnical differences. Pluralism is why we have an Abraham in our midst today, why we have a Muhammad in our midst today, despite our religious differences. Pluralism is why we are all collaborating as educators, building and growing what we know the future of Nigeria should be in terms of educational values. And I would say that, according to our dear Professor, Your Excellency, he once said that many lives have been lost and blood shed to unite this country, Nigeria. And it would be a waste for all of us of this young generation, men and women, to come together and toy with that sacrifice. So I thank Future Perspective for this amazing journey so far. I thank these facilitators and my participants for everything we have done together. Thank you very much, sir, and all of the partners. Thank you.
Your Excellency, all protocols duly observed. My fellow participants, the organizers of the members and staff of Future Perspective, I want to say a very big thank you for organizing a wonderful program such as this. Your Excellency, I want to begin my speech with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Marianne Williamson. And one of her most popular quotes is that our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I have listened to you many times on TV, and you've always spoken about how the youth need to be at the forefront of making a change in Nigeria and Africa as a whole. And here we are. Future Perspectives has given I and my colleagues an opportunity to grow, to make that change, to be at the forefront of that change we've always dreamt about in Nigeria. Because I believe, as a young innovator, that the future of Africa is in the hands of the youth. And it's the solutions to the problems of Africa can only come from Africans, especially the young Africans. Future Perspectives have given us a platform where we've developed even the little we came with. And one of the highlights of this training so far for me, the second day where we learned project management, and the second session we talked about digital skills and how can we make the change that we desire in the educational sector today if we don't leverage on technology. And so this opportunity is an opportunity I have never taken for granted, and I believe that nobody else will ever take it for granted. As a matter of fact, last night I was going through my Facebook profile, and I'm a software developer, so in between I do a little bit of Photoshop for fun, and I came across a Photoshop job I did in 2018 where I was shaking hands in a room. It was actually Buhari in front. Then I removed Buhari and I replaced him with myself. And in the image, His Excellency was at the far end and he was smiling. So I also came across a comment from my big sister, and in the comment, she said, "This boy, one day you will meet them." And today, it's a rare privilege that I am here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that's done. Right. So. Right. Good one. Well done. Thank you, everyone. And let me very quickly just say thank you to all our collaborators, UNESCO, Global Center for Pluralism, and of course the African FinTech Foundry. And we'll be talking maybe in a bit more detail about some of the collaboration that we've been able to get. And thank you also, I think the Canadian High Commission is here Thank you very, very much for making the time to be here. Now to the ITET first cohort participants. I am truly excited to be here with you, and I really, really think that this is something that we got right at Future Perspectives. That's getting a group of young people together to explore the opportunities for innovative education, especially technology-related innovative education. Just listening to Elizabeth and Tony, I think that there is so much already that we can learn. You know, just beginning with pluralism, and I think that's so critical. You know, the whole idea of collaboration, the whole idea of working together. You know, one of the big advantages of a country such as ours is just that we have such a great variety of perspectives, a great variety of individual talent, individual predispositions that could just help us to be a much better society and a much more educated society, because just learning about people itself is big. And I think that informs everything. Technology is not something in the air. It is based on our consciousness of people and their needs and their wants. We are reacting, technology, education and all of that reacts to people's needs, their wants, their desires, where they intend to go. So technology is not just something in the air. And I think that it helps a great deal that there's some emphasis on pluralism, as Elizabeth just pointed out. And of course, Tony and his photoshopping. You see, the problem, of course, with photoshopping is that when you now put the real thing there, nobody's sure. Nobody's sure now whether it is another photoshopped thing. You know. But having said so, I think that this program in particular is a very important one. We've talked about this a great deal. Of course, Yemi and Abi, who have been at the forefront of promoting this and at the forefront of working through it, developing the curriculum and all of that, you know, are possibly the best people to tell us exactly how they've conceived this. But this is very important. For me, I think this is absolutely important. The idea that we can actually have young people developing education, technology, proposals of every kind, you know, work of every kind, that can then go into their communities. I think that is so critical, especially now. We have to think out of the box. When we talk about education today, our country is growing by 6 million people every year. That is the size of Liberia every year. So we're not, and this country is not a small country, and will never be. It's just going to keep increasing in numbers. So we also have to improve in terms of the ideas, the techniques, the thought processes in education in particular. So we can't afford to think in terms of brick and mortar only. You just try to build schools, as many schools as possible. Brick and mortar isn't going to work in the next few years. We've got to think about how technology is going to give us all the incremental growth that we need for education. And that's just the way it's going to be. We're going to be educating millions and millions more people. And we can't do that by building classrooms. You can't build enough classrooms. So virtual reality, all the other virtual techniques that technology can bring will be important. You know, I was saying to some people who are attending the law school now that very soon we can't have an in-person law school anymore. Now you have campuses everywhere. But what we really need are good online models. And what you train people for in the law school, for instance, is just how to appear in court, what to say, how to speak, and that can be done by video. It can even, I mean, there are all sorts of other virtual ways now of even doing that. So think about science, think about how to, you know, the laboratories and all of that, how we'll do, you know, 3D versions of them and all of these metaverse type versions and all of those things that will make this effect. And very soon this technology will become cheaper and cheaper, especially with the kind of innovation that you guys are going to bring to all of what we're doing. So I think you have an important responsibility, each and every one of you. You have a very, very important responsibility. because the breakthroughs that your technology, sort of thing that you're doing, will, and I'm sure that there will be loads of breakthroughs, may make the difference between what we're doing today and what we should be doing in the future and how effective we'll be in the future. So I think you must take what you're doing very, very seriously indeed. I know that at the end of this there'll be 10 champions or something, but as you know, the mere fact that somebody is a champion doesn't mean that those who are not champions don't even necessarily have better ideas. It's just there's space for only 10, you know. So I think that one must, you know, especially the work you're doing, I mean, that you're here at all is evidence of the fact that your work is serious enough to be advertised to the world, you know. And I really look forward to seeing all the individual work that is going to be presented here or that has already been presented. And also, you know, I look forward to seeing the 10 best, you know, also. But please note that this, what we've started here, we intend to monitor it, we intend to follow it up, just so that we know what sort of progress we're making. And the progress that we're making is going to impact this country. And I believe it will impact the world as well. So thank you very much and welcome again to this. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Your Excellency. We're going to go into the Q&A session and we're going to make it as interactive as possible. We are going to start with Aminat Abdusalam, and she's going to ask a question, followed by Omolola Akimboye and Caleb, and you're going to ask him your questions. These questions have been put together by our participants. They're questions from their hearts. They're questions that they would want to ask you to help them understand better how to move forward. So, Aminat, the floor is yours.
I am Aminat Abdusalam. My question is, what are your thoughts on targeting and equipping elementary school kids with 21st century digital skills, enhancing their talent and creativity while igniting their curiosity?
This generation, or the generations of young people today, are, as they say, digital natives. So this is really just intuitive for young people. And I think that what you'll find is that young people anywhere can very quickly take on instructions in technology. And that is so across the country. I have a school in Maiduguri, in collaboration with a few friends. And we took on several of the young boys and girls who were orphaned by the conflict, the insurgency in Maiduguri. This is about 6 years ago. And one of the things that we emphasized was that we're going to give high quality education, especially technology-driven education, to these young people. And what we found, 5 years on, we actually had a dinner, 5-year anniversary dinner. Had many of the kids coming to Abuja from Maiduguri for that dinner. And what we saw, the display of various things that they had learned, technology, innovation, and all of that. I mean, just from things as banal as developing websites. These are kids who were 5 at the time. We brought them in, some 3, 4, 5 years after. Robotics, showing us what they're doing in robotics, code writing, all sorts of things that they're able to do. So it's very evident to me that we absolutely have no choice but to take advantage of the fact that young people, especially children, just naturally take onto technology. I mean, they don't have a problem. If you give a 2-year-old, 3-year-old your phone these days, I don't know how they figure it out, but they figure it out. And you can give a professor like me the same device, and I'm fumbling around it for hours. So there is something to be said for engaging children early, because clearly, this is intuitive for children. So I'm in full agreement. I'm in full support. I'm in that of the sort of work that you're doing with children.
I'm Akimboye Omolola. I'm the innovator and team head of Lola Pedagogical Foundation. So this is my question, Your Excellency. What is the government doing to improve on the curriculums in schools, such that it conforms to the 21st century inclusive teaching and learning methodologies to include lifelong learning and EdTech? Thank you.
First, I'm no longer in government, so I cannot speak. I cannot speak for government. But let me say, though, that many do not understand that basic education, primary education, and secondary education is actually the business of state governments and not the federal government, right? So that's what the Constitution prescribes, and that's how it works. So many times when people ask the federal government, so why do you have 10.3 million children out of school? The federal government's response really ought to be that we have only 100 secondary schools, we have no primary schools. Federal government has no primary schools. It has about 100 across the country, odd secondary schools called unity schools. Every other primary or secondary school is actually owned by the state or private people within the state. And that's the nature of a federation. That's how federations work, where you have individual states and all of that. Now, what the federal government can do and what it tries to do is to prescribe standards as much as possible. So the prescription of standards, just saying, this is what we think you ought to do in terms of standards. And to a very good extent, there's been a lot of work that's been done on STEM education. But in the case of the federal government of Nigeria, we describe it as STEAM, including the arts. So then it comes STEAM as opposed to STEM. So there's a curriculum that's been developed, which has a lot of, the components of what you would expect of 21st century type education. Digital technology, of course, is an important part of it. The general STEAM education is a most important part of it. Critical thinking is a very important aspect of it, how to work, collaboration and all of that. Unfortunately, the rate of adoption of the curriculum has not been very fast. The uptake has not been fast at all. Because again, it depends on individual states, individual communities and all that. So the uptake hasn't been very fast. And the other thing is that we also as federal government needed to have continued to upgrade the curriculum. That has been extremely slow. And that's just the nature of bureaucracy. It's very, very slow. So there's so many new things that are going on in education across the world. So many new things that are even being developed locally that haven't been incorporated into our thinking through a curriculum and developing the curriculum. And I suspect that what we'll eventually find is that whatever it is that governments are doing in terms of shaping a curriculum will be overtaken by innovation, will be overtaken by the work that individuals like yourselves are doing. So we are always going to find that the government will be on the back foot and government will have to keep playing catch up because there's just no way that just in terms of innovation, just in terms of thinking, you can go as fast as the minds of people are working. So for me, I think a lot of thinking out of the box is what we're going to find in educating people in Nigeria as time goes on. We're going to find that a lot of this is decentralized and that there are so many different ways by which we're going to be trying to achieve the same thing. And really that's what we might find. A lot of people are going to get their education in much different ways from the way that we received our education, where you had a formal, length of time in schooling and all of that. There's a great deal of innovation that's taking place today.
My name is Yemi Osinbajo. I'm the founder of Tech Lead Nigeria, driving future relevant education in technology for kids. My question is, what are your thoughts on homeschooling, particularly how do you feel, or how do you perceive homeschooling its place in a world, in the wider context of education, as technology-enabled remote work is becoming more prevalent? What is your thoughts on homeschooling, especially I'd like to go for basic education level? Thank you, sir.
I think that homeschooling is an interesting idea, very, very interesting idea. As a matter of fact, I tried to experiment with my own son, when my son was growing up. I have two daughters and then a son. My son is the last, So I tried to experiment with him, And what my wife and I did was basically not to let him go to school early. So my other kids were in kindergarten from when they were 2 years old. But he just wandered around with me, or with his mom. So I was teaching in the university at the time, and I'll just take him along to the university. He'll sit around there, sit at lectures. I mean, of course, not understanding anything of what was being said. But whenever I was taking a lecture, he would sit down there, One thing that he learned was just the discipline of sitting through long and boring stuff. But also, I found that he was able to take on very difficult concepts, as time went on, very quickly. I found, of course, that I was better educated than his teachers were. Of course, I'm a professor teaching for many, many years. So obviously, I was much better educated than those who would have taught him in primary school. So there was a great advantage to his wandering around with me. That's not exactly homeschooling, if you see what I mean, because, one of the things that happened was that his handwriting was extremely bad, because I never taught him, or his mom never taught him handwriting. So he had a lot of great concepts, that he obviously took on. But skills like handwriting and all of that. And then, of course, skills like socializing, although he ended up being a very friendly sort of person. But I think that one disadvantage of homeschooling is that you're not exposing the young person to, plurality or pluralism, as we've been very, very well instructed by Elizabeth. So there's a need for that. There's a need for that association and all that. So I think it has its advantages. And I think that when it's convenient and when it works, there's no reason why not. But I also think that one must then find, because obviously one of the great downsides is how to ensure that there is socialization and all that. And to what extent can you homeschool? Because homeschooling also has a curriculum. If you're going to do it right, you're going to be teaching different things. You have the capacity to do so. Or will you have people who can do so? Will you be able to engage the teachers and who can do so? So, I mean, it's a good thing, but I think that there's a lot that obviously a person who wants to homeschool his or her children would need to know.
My name is Bella Bassi, the founder of TASK, the after-school study center based in New York, Kwara State. So my question goes thus. What is the government doing to reduce the gap between students in private schools and those in public educational institutions? With increasing private sector institutions, will it contribute to widening inequalities, especially for rural communities?
Frankly, I think that it will be extremely difficult because public schools, generally speaking, it depends on where, again, depends on which state. What you find is that good public schools almost invariably lead to private schools even closing down in the places where you have very, very good quality public schools. Because if you look at the sheer number of private schools there are, and the various types and grades and competencies and all of that, there are very many private schools that don't measure up at all, and there are some that do. So I think that what government ought to do, because the best private schools obviously are usually better than public schools, but what government ought to do is really to improve the quality of public schools so that you can actually reduce the number of people who want to spend money out of pocket to send their children to private schools, But that again is a sort of advocacy that we must make to state governments in particular, because really they handle primary and secondary education. But I think, improving the quality of public schools is very, very crucial. And as time goes on, I think it becomes even easier, especially with technology. There's so much that can be done that will make that's not as expensive, because people always complain, governments always complain about, cost of this and cost of that. But I think technology has also made it relatively cheaper to introduce certain types of pedagogy skills and all of that can be used effectively without necessarily spending that much money. So I think just improving the quality of public schools is something that will help a great deal. I think.
My name is Chimi Gurugo, and I'm the founder of Kid Genius. And my question is very simple. You've always spoken about Corona, and you've spoken about how Corona shaped you as a child. And today, Corona is still a great school in Nigeria. So very few schools have been able to keep up with standards such as Corona. So for us here as EdTech Innovators, what would be your advice and suggestion for us to be able to create an EdTech organization or company that will last for generations like Corona?
An important thing to always bear in mind is that anything that will last must be based on values, strong values, anything that will last. So whether it's a school or a tech company, it must be based on strong values and the right sort of motivation. Why are you doing this? If something you're doing is purely for money, then it may not last. And the reason, by comparison with the Corona School is a trust, is not a for-profit, is for a not-for-profit. So years and years and years of people who have dedicated their lives to teaching young people, to educating young people. So that's been the set of values upon which Corona School's progress has been based, which I believe is why it has lasted so long. And I think that we must also, and which is why what you're doing is extremely important, because if this were just based on searching for just making money, I'm not so sure that you would even be here today. And there's a passion that comes with doing things that will last. There's a certain level of commitment such that you wake up in the morning, you're excited about doing it. You're excited about going forward with it, whether or not you can see the immediate financial or material rewards. So I think that that's an important thing that one has to bear in mind. If you are motivated purely by how you can make a quick buck from this thing, then it's not likely to last, But if you are motivated by much higher values, how can I impact the world? How can I make a real difference, How can I, why is this technology so important that I want to, and the commercial aspect of it is very important because obviously you need to think about that. But it mustn't be your primary motivating factor. Otherwise, you might find that you're unable to, once you see that it isn't bringing in immediate rewards, and most likely it won't bring in immediate rewards anyway. You'll find yourself going on to other things, or selling ice cream or bananas instead of technology. Thank you.
We're going to go on to the second set of questions, and we're going to start with Esther Idoko, on to Mustafa Samiu, Abimbola, Otegbade, Chineyedu, Timi Adewiyi. So you just introduce yourself, the name of your EdTech, and straight to your question. Thank you.
My name is Idoko Esther Obi. I'm a student of University of Nigeria. Currently, I'm running a PhD in guidance and counseling. My innovation name is Prioritize Counseling Service Centers using EdTech. Okay, Your Excellency, my question goes thus. What can be done to reduce out of school in Nigeria?
Out of school children.
Out of school in Nigeria. Then, sir, do you feel that the way we are educating children fully prepares them for the needs of the 21st century? What more can be done, sir?
Again, this comes back to the role of government in particular. And just as I've said, the focus of reduction of the numbers of out-of-school children must be on the work that states do. There is a breakdown of states and the number of out-of-school children that each state has. And of course, out-of-school children is measured usually by the number of those who do not go to primary school or who drop out of primary school. So in some of the work that I did as Vice President of Nigeria, I was chairman of the National Economic Council, which is a monthly meeting of the state governors. And part of what we did was a sort of name and shame of the different states. So very frequently we'll publish the number of states that have a certain number of out-of-school children. And there are many states that have over 500,000 children who are out of school. Now, part of what we've tried to do at the time was to introduce some incentives. One of the things that we found very, very useful, although for other reasons, was the homegrown school feeding program. When we introduced the homegrown school feeding program, that is lunch every day for children in public schools, especially those from primary 1 to 3. That's what the federal government paid for. in some cases primary 1 to 5. But for those, once that was introduced, enrollment actually went up by 40%. So several states were able to benefit from that, but that was again a federal government initiative. And one of the other things that we try to emphasize also to the states and to support states that were prepared to do more for bringing bringing children to school, especially girls, because there were several states that did not encourage education of girls at all, And if you don't encourage education of girls, obviously the downsides are many. It means the girls get married too early. It means that population growth begins to outstrip the rate of our own development, or our GDP. So generally speaking, we try to use a lot of the policies to address other issues as well. So one of the critical things to do with, and this is from the perspective of government, is to ensure that state governments are paying attention to the number of out-of-school children. As a matter of fact, at a point, there were some states that were actually falling back, states that had very high percentages of children in school, several of them falling back, especially some states in the southwest at the time. And so we had to find out what exactly was, and some in the southeast. So we had to find out what exactly was going on and work with the state governments and all that. And what I found is that if you pay attention to individual states and address their governors about these issues, and whatever advocacy you're doing, if it focuses on the numbers in those states, there's a tendency for the state governors to act more effectively and to do much more, But at the moment, when people talk about out-of-school children, they're asking the president of Nigeria, how come there are 10.3 million children? And the state governments keep very quiet. They don't say anything, almost as if this is the problem of the president, whereas it is the problem. Individual states, it's the problem of individual states and their governors. And, I think that our advocacy also, it will help if we looked at that, if we focused on them so that they do better. Do I think that today's education prepares children for the 21st century? No, I don't think so. I don't think that there's enough being done at all, In fact, as you probably know, we're just, we're going from my last answer, we're grappling with even getting children into school. So there isn't enough, clearly, that is futuristic about education and about the way that we are going about education. But we obviously have no choice. We must be thinking of how to prepare people for the 21st century. It's a completely new world, it's a completely new dimensions that we're going to be seeing in the next few years. And every year you even see that there is a difference in practically everything that is going on. So this is certainly something that needs to be taken very seriously. But as I've said, development of curriculum or curricula is thinking along those lines, but we need to do a lot more. The acceptance of those curricula by state governments, by local governments, etc., is also very crucial. But there's no question in my mind that we're not doing enough in terms of preparing young people for the 21st century. But this is an ongoing task, and this is something that I think we absolutely must focus on.
Good afternoon, sir, Your Excellency. My name is Mustafa Saliu. I'm co-founder of OrganoTech, a technology that is designed for teaching, learning, and research in organic chemistry in tertiary institutions. Because organic chemistry has a long history of bad reputation among students of chemistry, pharmacy, and medical students. So our technology is designed to aid the teaching and learning of organic chemistry. So I have two questions for you this afternoon, sir. But before I go into my question, I would like you to put a base to the question. According to Joint Harris, as published by Guardians 2019, energy use in digital consumption is said to have a bigger impact on global warming than the entire aviation industry. So my question, number one, is how can Nigeria and other large populations advance their economy without jeopardizing the planet? Secondly, in what way can Nigeria minimize the benefit of its higher youth population? Thank you.
Mustafa Saliu had an interesting question about the energy and digital consumption, and how the energy that is consumed by digital use alone or digital technology far outweighs what the airlines consume in terms of, or emit in terms of the dangerous emissions and all that. I think the comparison, though, is a bit, comparison is a bit one-sided. First of all, how many planes are there, you know? I mean, the airline industry is not a particularly large industry compared to the use of digital technology, which obviously is a much more, I mean, this is on an individual basis. Everybody in this room uses digital technology in one way or the other, you know, and then, you know, mobile telephony is digital technology. Mobile telephony has deep penetration in many countries of the world, even the least developed countries of the world. So really, it's not a very, I don't think it's a very good comparison, you know. But the truth anyway is that digital technology does consume energy, and it also depends on what we're doing with energy, right? So there's a lot of concentration now, and we won't have enough time to talk about that, about the use of renewable energy, you know, and how we can reduce the use of fossil fuel-driven energy, you know. And this is really at the heart of some of the work that we're doing in climate action. So we're saying that, especially for countries such as ours, where we have, or in the African continent, where we have 60% of the renewable energy potential of the entire world, there's no reason at all why we should not focus on the use of renewable energy for all our electricity needs and even for industrial use. And there's a lot of work that's been done on this, a lot of very, very great work that's been done on this. So I think that the future is one where we're using less and less fossil fuel-driven energy, and we're using more and more renewable energy. In any event, that's the only way by which we can avoid the catastrophe of the climate disaster. And I think that from the work that I have seen, from a lot of the work that is currently being done, it's entirely possible. And we may not, especially here in Africa, there's something which we've been developing called climate positive growth, which really looks at how Africa using renewable energy, not just for purposes of industry, for practically everything, or for most things, can be the first green industrial society in the world. And I think that that is possible. It's a vision that, in my view, if we pursue diligently, we can achieve. And this is something that I think will answer the questions around, you know, consumption of electricity by the use of digital technology, especially fossil fuel-driven energy consumption. I think there was also a question on how do you make use of the youth bulge, the number of young people that there are. As a matter of fact, one of the components of what I describe as climate positive growth is really the fact that we have the youngest and fastest growing workforce in the world. And when I say we are talking of Africa, the African continent, of course, Nigeria is the biggest part of that particular demography. So I think that we do not have a choice but to use this very important resource. As a matter of fact, that is the most important resource that we have, you know, the number of young people that we have. And every plan and every one of our projections takes that into account, or must take that into account. So when we say, for example, that we're going to use renewable energy as a revolutionary challenge to the whole climate change or energy transition journey, it depends almost entirely on the fact that we have a large number of young people who can be deployed to, you know, for various things that need to be done. I mean, a lot of what we'll be doing. Just look at manufacture of solar panels, you know, manufacture of the different components of wind energy, and so many different things. And that whole value chain, there's so many opportunities, huge opportunities that exist. And I think that we must be, as we think, and a lot of the policies that I've seen that are being developed either by governments or by companies, by corporates that are involved in this, take into account all of the, the demographics that we're seeing, the young people that we're seeing, and how that can be applied. So I think, it's a given that that's exactly what we'll do.
Your Excellency, sir, I express my gratitude for this valuable opportunity. My name is Abimbola Otebadi, and I'm an IT professional. And after the pandemic, I founded Bookmoth, an EdTech social enterprise. This is my question. Given the intersection of your passion for EdTech and climate change, how can Nigeria strategically leverage educational technology to promote environmental literacy and sustainable practices among students while fostering a generation that is conscious of and actively can address climate challenges? Thank you.
It's okay. Sort of interface between EdTech and climate change, and how young people can be instructed in using EdTech and climate change, I believe, for their own progress and progress of their societies. Now, first, I think that climate change education is crucial, especially because it will define the future for us in every possible way. There's nothing that will not be affected by climate change. Absolutely nothing. It will affect the way that what we eat, how we grow what we eat, what we wear, how we manufacture. Practically everything is going to be touched or affected by climate change. So educating people about climate change is just an intuitive thing to do. We absolutely must. We have no choice, because that is what's going to define the future. Practically everything that we're seeing today will change one way or the other. I mean, airlines are thinking of how do we use biomass fuel. How do we, industries are thinking, how do we use hydrogen? Just last week, we were with a major cement manufacturer, and there's talk about how to use hydrogen to manufacture what will then become green cement. I mean, cement that does not use fossil fuels to drive growth. We're also talking to a major agricultural company, and they're already using a lot of renewable energy in processing their agricultural products. Their rice processing plants, for example, are using biomass. Some are using solar. So there's a lot going on now, and that's what's going to define the future. Practically everything will be affected one way or the other. So I think that that's just the intuitive thing to do. As a matter of fact, whether we like it or not, we're going to end up exactly doing so. So I don't think that we have much of a choice, and there's not much that we can do to even avoid this, because it's going to be so much a part of our everyday lives, and it's already becoming so.
My name is Chine, and my innovation is Ezibu. So my question is this: how can we integrate policies in nutrition and climate change education to help address food insecurities, create food production, reduce hunger and malnutrition?
Again, this is an important subject, because first, what we're seeing today is in how farming practices are going to be altered significantly by considerations of climate change and climate action. So the way that we do our farming, in such a way that our farming respects biodiversity and respects the environment is absolutely important now. So there are very many things that are going on. Even just deforestation for purposes of farming has its own big implications for climate change and then for what happens in the next few years. So even just farming practices, what is being done about farming practices, a whole range of information and education that needs to be had around just what to do with new farming practices and how to ensure that farming practices do not tilt the balance in favor of destruction of the environment and in favor of the devastations of climate change. And we're already seeing that with deforestation and all that, and what is going on. Now, for instance, if you look at the Lake Chad area, which used to be a very major source of irrigation for millions of people around that area. Lake Chad used to be about 35,000 square kilometers of water. Now it's reduced to under 1,500 square kilometers of water. It's literally just dried up. I can imagine the implications for all of those around that area. So there's so much that we need to do, just in terms of ensuring that we're able to maintain a balance, especially for those of us who are in a part of the world where we're growing, as I said earlier, 6 million persons every single year. I mean, we certainly have a lot to do in that respect. So, and that's going to affect everything. I mean, whatever it is, if we're not able to be sustainable in food production, clearly nutrition will suffer. Even now, nutrition is a major problem, and so many young people, the statistics are staggering. If you look at the number of young people whose physical development is stunted, mental development is stunted on account of problems with nutrition and all that. So we can't afford a situation where we don't think in terms of the relationship between climate change and nutrition. And if we don't pay attention to it, things just get steadily worse. So I think it's important in terms of government policy. And I'm happy to see that the federal government has been developing policies, especially climate-friendly policies around agriculture, and trying to teach this by extension farming to farmers and all that. But obviously this needs to be a much more aggressive process, just so that people learn a lot faster. And I hope that some of the work that you will be doing also will address some of those kinds of issues.
My name is Timmy. I'm co-founder at ITET. My question is, how do you think Nigeria can leapfrog the last 3 industrial revolution and be at the forefront of the 4th industrial revolution? Thank you very much.
As a matter of fact, I don't think we have a choice. We've already leapfrogged. Here we are, here we are. I mean, and the good thing about technology is that it enables us to leapfrog. I mean, so look at what has happened, for instance, with mobile telephony, with our mobile phone technology. Because of mobile phone technology, we can do so many things that were impossible to do. At a time, I remember speaking to bankers, even just in 2015, when we came into office, about how to make payments in the rural areas, payments for conditional cash transfers and the various things we were doing under social investment policy. And they all said, oh, we're happy to do it, we're going to do it, oh, we're going to have all our branches here and there. Of course, it turned out to be impossible, because they couldn't have their branches in every one of those rural areas. So we had to fall back on the increasing use of fintech and several people who were using digital-based technology to reach large numbers of people. So when we did trader money and those kinds of things, a young man called Uzoma actually developed what is now called the Growth Platform. The Growth Platform is actually a technology-based platform that helps first to recruit informal traders, market people and all that. Takes their, where they are, geolocates where they are, takes their photograph and everything. We have all that detail, and then we can get all their bio details and all that. We can contact them directly, lend them money, and the sort of thing that you are doing also is driven by technology. The payment of school fees and all that. Completely driven by technology. So we can't even, I don't even think that we have a choice. We're already in this 4th industrial revolution, and I think that the good thing is that it doesn't take too much infrastructure to be able to do so. I mean, so mobile telephone, at some point we had 400,000, what do they call them, fixed line telephones. Now we have 100 million or so, because you don't have to go and get a box and get all your, wires here and there, So I think technology just enables you to get into this 4th industrial revolution, without too much stress. So I think that's, yeah. Is that?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. We're going to move on to the final segment of this. And this segment is more about having our participants connect with you on a personal level. We know that an individual is not just about the work that they do, they're also made up of different things like family or your values and all of those things that have shaped you to become who you are today. So the first question is, so when you were in your 20s, what is the one thing that you would look back and you wish you had done better?
Okay.
Your second question would be 15 years ago. So this is basically reflections.
Right.
15 years ago, what would have been done differently if you had access to the same knowledge and influence that you have today? So we're all gaining knowledge, we're young people. If you were in our shoes, what are the things that you would have done differently so that we can take that into action as well? And finally, given your multifaceted role as a professor, a lawyer, a former vice president, how have you managed to balance your responsibilities and your commitments while staying engaged with development in education and technology? So more like a balance between home, family, work, responsibilities, passion. How have you been able to put all of those things together to become Professor Yemi Osinbajo that we all admire today?
Okay. All right, so I can. All right. Thank you very much. No, that's okay. First, let me. The one thing I hoped I would have done better, if I could relive my life and go back to my 20s. The one thing is that I would have traveled more within Nigeria. That's one thing I certainly would have preferred to do much, much better. I would have traveled more within Nigeria, traveled more, gone to more places within this country. So I went around Nigeria, when I was much, much older. And I found that a lot of the experiences, a lot of the people I met, a lot of the sorts of just generally my perception about the country, would have been much, much better informed if I had done a lot more traveling within the country when I was 20 years old. Of course, I did a bit of traveling, but not much at all. Certainly not what I would have liked to do. So that's the one thing, if there's one thing that I would like to do differently. Okay, so 15 years ago, what would I have done differently with the knowledge and influence I have today? That's a very interesting way of putting it. Well, the truth is that, so if I was to go back 15 years, I certainly would have been involved. Well, 15 years ago, I was involved in public service. I was Attorney General in Lagos, about that time, But what I would have done a lot more is that I would have been more involved in politics. I would have been more involved, directly involved in politics. I think that, politics has a huge overarching importance in the lives of people, especially in the developing world. And I think that leaving politics to just about anybody who's, is a very, very harmful thing indeed, And one of the things I think young people should do is really to get as much as possible involved in politics at whatever level, and not necessarily elective politics, but being involved in, in governance and politics and thinking through those things in your communities. If I had to do that again, if you see what I mean, and with the knowledge and influence I have, I certainly would do more, spend more time also in politics, and also maybe just local politics, what's going on locally, what can we do to change things, even in our local government, what can we do to change things? And it's incredible how much power and influence people have if they just pay attention to their locality alone, just their communities alone. Sometimes, I'm amazed at the quality of individuals that rise to high levels in the politics of our country. Somebody just shows up and says, I'm the women representative I'm the representative of women. And I ask myself, look at all the brilliant women that are here. And then you just find somebody who says that, this person has no reason why they should be. But they represent everybody. Same as young people. Somebody just, I'm the youth. And look at all you guys here who are brilliant, doing brilliant things. And this fellow who has done absolutely nothing says, hey, I'm the representative of all young people, you know. And I think the reason why we have to pay attention to some of this stuff, you know, is that you must, you know, if you are influential in your localities, then you truly represent the young people. Of course, there are many young people who are in politics, several who are in politics who are also very accomplished. That's true. But then there are just not that many. You know? So I think that's something that I would have liked to do differently. So then the balance between home, work, and, you know, all the various things that I do. Frankly, I don't think I've done that very well. You know, so I'm not sure I have much advice to offer in that respect. I don't think I've done that very well. I think that by and large, you know, something suffers, you know, when you're doing some other thing, when you pour yourself and heart into something. I doubt whether I certainly wasn't able to achieve any kind of very great balance that I can tell you about and offer as honest advice about how to do this, you know. What I found was that I was able to, you know, so working in the public service almost always meant that you are constantly engaged, you know, and that there was almost very little time. So whatever time I had, especially for family, I simply just spent whatever time I had. And then, of course, we had holidays during the course of the year and all of that. But there's no, I don't think I struck the ideal balance, you know. I'm not so sure how to. So maybe you need to ask someone who's done who is much more balanced, you know. And one of the things I've always said is that if you are going to get married, it's good to get married to someone who at least can watch your back, who has your back, you know. And my wife had my back and still has my back. So I think that's, you know, at least that's something that's worked, you know, very well, you know. And I think that, so if I can offer any advice, I'll advise that you go and make sure that you get married to someone who can. Thank
you. Wow, I think that was a great session. Would everyone give us a round of applause? Thank you. I just wanted to, on behalf of the whole team here, express gratitude for you making time out of your schedule. As not everyone might know this, you know, you were just recently got back from Namibia last night. You had a UNDP engagement, and so, you know, but it was very important to you to be here and be a part of this. So very, very appreciative of the fact that you modified your schedule to be here. So everyone, please give a round of applause.